Welcome to the South African Digital Marketing Podcast. My name's Terence Mentor and I'm a digital marketer who's realized that since this industry is constantly changing, we need to be constantly learning. This episode is a quick bit, so no guest, but I do want to talk about influencer marketing. Specifically, I want to talk about influencer marketing from the perspective of the influencer and even more specifically from a nano or micro influencer. So here's the deal. For the last 7 to 8 years, I have been a nano influencer on my other brand called Aphrodaddy. And over the years, I've participated in many great campaigns, but unfortunately, even more difficult ones. So if you're in a digital marketing agency that's about to run an influencer campaign, here are a few things that I would love for you to keep in mind if you're working with nano and micro influencers. Number one, please make sure that whoever has the final say in the selection of the influencers has actually seen their content. There have been quite a few occasions when I've been brought onto a campaign, I create the content, and then I get told, this isn't what we had in mind. So either they don't like the style or even the quality of the content, but that's really confusing because I haven't changed the way I create the content or the style of my content. So why are you suddenly unhappy with what I'm making? Now, I know that brands want to be associated with very high quality content that fit their style and tone of voice. But that means that it's even more crucial to choose content creators that can match that. And that starts at the very beginning of the campaign before you even approach the influencers. The best campaigns that I've been a part of have allowed me to just continue with my content creation workflow. And that has the added benefit of not completely shocking my audience with this new style and tone of voice. So influencer marketing agencies, please choose your influencers wisely, especially if they're nano and micro influencers, because we don't have the time or capacity to learn how to make new content. Next up, please keep in mind the length of the contracts that you are sending to influencers. Now, if you're working with a huge influencer, that person probably has a lawyer or even a team of lawyers on their side. They have a whole business around them to help them deal with the legalese that you're sending to them. But if you're working with a nano influencer, that person isn't doing this as their full-time job. They have other things going on and they do not have time to pick apart the legal document that you have sent to them. This is one of the biggest bugbears I have when I said, yes, I would love to be part of this campaign. And then I receive a document that's 20 pages long that I have to pick through every single line because I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand what this is. I mean, really, what do you need to have in that contract? A place for both parties to sign, a list of what is required, and a list of what the payment's going to be. That should be all there is. If that takes more than 5 pages, what is going on? How much protection do you need from the single nano influencer with 2,000 followers on Instagram? It's a real waste of time and it's incredibly frustrating for the influencer. Number 3 is briefings. Now, I know campaigns, especially larger campaigns, require some sort of briefing time to make sure that everyone is on the same page. You want to make sure that everyone understands what the real goals of the campaign are, what the kind of tone of voice is, what language to use, and the general rollout of the campaign. A briefing kind of gets all of that out the way. But does the briefing have to be over an hour and a half? I don't think it does. Yes, if this is a 3-month-long campaign that has multiple angles and multiple different kinds of posts, long briefings might be required. But if it's for 1 or 2 posts, why does that have to take an hour and a half? Why is the briefing almost as long as it's going to take to create the content? That does not make sense. Once again, that's just about respecting the nano influencer's time. Remember, this isn't their full-time job. They can't just get up and leave to go to a briefing. They have to take time off from their actual job to attend this. And that might actually exclude some really good influencers from attending because it has to be an hour and a half. The 4th thing I'd love for agencies to keep in mind can actually be rolled into that whole briefing and contract discussion, and that is to make sure that you are very clear about the metrics that you will need when the campaign is over. Having that laid out at the very beginning is very useful because sometimes the influencer might not even be able to access the number that you're looking for or has never done that before, so it'll be good for them to figure out how to get that number. So if they've never done a campaign like this before, they have a little bit of time to figure out the nuts and bolts of all the measurement that's required at the end of the campaign. Again, this is really about putting yourself in the shoes of a nano influencer. They're not working at a digital marketing agency. They're not a full-time influencer with people around them to support them with this. They're doing all of this by themselves while also having a full-time job and family life and everything else that goes on. The final thing, which is truly the biggest issue that I've seen with influencer campaigns, is the payment of the influencers. The amount of hoops that sometimes have to be jumped through to get a payment for a simple campaign is ridiculous. Now, I know that often the influencer agency has to wait for their client to make the payment before they can pay the influencers. I get that kind of workflow. But when I have to fill out an additional 3 to 4 different forms to be paid by you, that drives me insane. I know what's extra crazy is that it's often the agencies that have required you to fill out that 20-page contract at the beginning of the campaign, then require you to fill out 3 or 4 different pages, go to the police station to get them certified, and then sometimes give them the original form in hard copy. They don't even let you scan it and send it to them. This is insane. This is beyond the scope of what a single nano-influencer should be doing. Now, I know that especially larger companies have a whole process of getting individuals onto their system as a vendor. But if you want to run an influencer campaign that has nano-influencers in it, you have to circumvent that whole system. You have to create a new system that makes payments to them simple and easy. Otherwise, they'll be waiting 3 to 6 months to even a year to get payment for a small campaign. That's not okay, and it puts your agency and your business into a bad light. The one thing you don't want after an influencer campaign is to have an influencer go onto their platforms and say, hey, I did this work for this brand and it's been 6 months and they still haven't paid me. That is the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve with an influencer campaign. They should be talking about the great experience that they've had with your brand, not the negative experience they've had with it. I think if you keep those 5 things in mind, it's going to go a long way in making your nano and micro influencer campaigns so much more effective and a lot smoother for yourself and for the influencers you're working for. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the South African Digital Marketing Podcast. Please remember to subscribe wherever you're listening. And if there is a influencer marketer somewhere that you think needs to hear this, please send it to them and say, this is from Terrence Mentor. Of course, if you have any thoughts or questions, maybe you have a rebuttal for some of the things I've just said, you can email it to me. Send it to podcast@tmdigital.co.za. That's podcast@T for Tango, M for Mother, digital.co.za. And I'll get back to you there. By the way, if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and a review. It does a lot to make sure that this podcast gets seen by other people and increases the reach, which as a marketer makes me feel really good. So you can go a long way in making me feel great just by leaving a rating and a review. Thanks so much for listening. This was the South African Digital Marketing Podcast.